My name is Andrew Bohn. I'm the CEO of Ocean Logistics, a shipping company based in Vanuatu. We operate a fleet of 9 tugboats, landing craft, and barges in Vanuatu and around the Pacific. I'm also the chairman of the Vanuatu Shipping Association. I was watching a video on LinkedIn yesterday. It was an interview between Honorable Minister Regenvanu of Vanuatu's Ministry of Climate Change and a lady from the Caribbean named Marla Ducaran. And the topic was Vanuatu's efforts at the IMO to achieve net zero and climate finance for infrastructure. And particularly one of the topics was about roads and the importance of roads and how much it's costing these days to build resilient roads and drainage. And in the interview, Honorable Minister Regenvanu did touch on shipping and the efforts to decarbonize shipping and bring in new technologies, which I think it's right for Vanuatu to be in the conversation, but we have a long ways to go just to get the basics right in the shipping industry in Vanuatu. One point is that marine infrastructure is extremely sparse and limited. We have some wharfs in the capital cities, Port Vila and Luganville, and then if you talk to consultants, they will list a number of places that there's marine infrastructure in the islands. They'll tell you that there's a wharf Fontana and at Litslitz and a number of other locations, but actually when you go to those islands, it barely meets the definition of a wharf. Litslitz, for example, there is a wharf at the end of a rock causeway. Very few ships actually use the wharf. Most of the ships are using the rock causeway itself. They're just dropping the ramps on the rock causeway, and that works well enough, but it just barely meets the definition of marine infrastructure. And if that's what we're pointing to and saying that there are wharfs in the islands, I can tell you, as an operator who delivers cargo to the islands and as the chairman of the Vanuatu Shipping Association, which we represent a number of the largest shipping companies in Vanuatu, infrastructure in the islands is extremely limited. So I think before we get into the conversation about newer ships or greener technologies, we need to be talking about just basic wharf infrastructure in the islands, and that does a number of things. So when a landing craft or other vessel delivers cargo to a location where there is no wharf infrastructure, they end up having to beach. So you're grounding about the vessel, you're dropping your ramp down onto the beach, and you're unloading cargo. So many of the vessels in Vanuatu have barges or landing craft with ramps, and they're able to do this, but when you're doing this, the sand and the rocks of the beach are scouring the bow section of the vessel. And what that's doing is taking off the protective coating. You're removing the primer and the anti-foul coating paint, which is protecting the steel bow section of the vessel. And you're going to rapidly degrade that marine protective coating, and then what you get subsequently is you get rust and degradation. And the steel starts to get thinner. So then when you go to Slipway, instead of just repainting the bow section, you oftentimes have to replate steel and cut out thin sections and replace with new steel. And that takes a much longer than just a paint job. It requires welding, it's much greater costs, and it's directly linked to a lack of infrastructure in the islands and the conditions that we ask our seafarers and our vessels to work in. So that's something that's pretty important. And then we touch on slipways. So there is no national slipway infrastructure in the country. There's a number of small facilities where operators informally beach their vessels using roller airbags, and that's just the state of play in the industry at the moment. So it's something that when I hear the minister talking about the aspirations to go green or to decarbonize the domestic fleet, the reality of it is for us working in the industry is we just need the basics at the moment. I think it's great to be aspirational, and I actually support the minister, and I think it will be a good thing for the country. But before we get there, we need to build wharf infrastructure in the country. We need to build a slipway in the country, and we need to revitalize our Vanuatu Maritime College so we're able to train up seafarers to the level that we'll need to meet for these new technologies that are coming in. I think Vanuatu is a long ways. I am open to the idea that climate finance or funding through the IMO with the new net zero framework could help bridge the gap on some of these things. But before the Vanuatu domestic fleet really takes on the challenge of decarbonizing, I think we need to get the basics right first. So just a bit of thought from the domestic shipping industry, the Vanuatu-based shipping industry, on how we should be approaching change. Thank you, Mas.